Hey everyone, how's life treating you? Life in Ontario is definitely more normal than it was a year ago. Hopefully we're in the tail end of this pandemic. Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, a couple of people have asked me what it was like for my family when my son was diagnosed with autism. So why not? We'll kick back with a glass of wine and have a bit of a story time. I said in a previous video that I had an inkling that George was different from the time he was a baby, before he could even crawl. There were some very early signs and I don't know. I think sometimes parents just know, or they have a feeling. One of the big indications for us was that by the time George was 2, he had almost no speech, and he used to have meltdowns out of the blue. They never seemed like tantrums to us. It wasn't like, I can't have candy, so now I'm just going to lose my mind. We saw real distress in those meltdowns, and we had no idea why they were happening. So at his 2-year checkup, we asked our doctor for a referral, and the doctor, super nice guy, but anyway, he told us that the range of development at this age is really broad, and we should wait a couple of years and see what happens. I will always regret listening to that advice. It was terrible advice. But I was tired, I was pregnant, and I trusted our doctor. Fast forward to a year later. We're in the same doctor's office for the 3-year checkup. Now I have a baby who's a few months old, I have postpartum depression, and I'm stressed to the gills about a bunch of life things that are going on. I'd lost my job, my dad had died. There was a lot. So we're in the doctor's office, and I said to the doctor, listen, I will sit in your office gathering dust if I need to. I am not going to budge until I get a referral for an assessment. Once we got the referral, we were put onto a waiting list for the assessment, but 2 things happened while we were on the waiting list. First, George was booked in for a hearing assessment. If your child has a speech delay, it's always good to test their hearing. That does sometimes turn out to be the issue. It wasn't the case for George, but if you're in this situation, get the hearing checked. That way you can just be sure you're focusing on the right thing. The second thing that happened was that George was given an immediate referral to a speech and language therapist. So while we waited for the assessment, we were able to work on learning how we could communicate with George. We were on the assessment waiting list for about 6 months, and the assessment itself took about a month. We had a bunch of appointments with a bunch of different specialists, an OT, a speech therapist, a psychologist, a medical doctor, all kinds of people. Then came the day when we sat down with the lead doctor to get the results. Now, bear in mind, I didn't understand autism at the time. I had no idea that I'm on the spectrum myself. And I had actively prevented myself from considering the idea that George might be autistic. For some reason I feared it, probably because I didn't understand it. Humans tend to fear what they don't understand. So I'm sitting there with this mindset when the doctor tells us that not only is George autistic, he's on the severe end of the spectrum. When you have a kid, you form a picture in your head of what your family's life is going to look like. You picture the birthday parties, the baseball games, the teenage angst. Then you get a diagnosis like this. You have a doctor telling you about all of the challenges your child is going to face, and that picture gets destroyed. That's what it was like sitting in the doctor's office that day. It was like someone took a baseball bat and smashed the picture I had created. My husband took about 10 seconds to collect himself. He literally walked out of the room and down the hall and back, and when he came back in, he was immediately in the mode of, okay, what next? It took me a bit longer, because what I didn't realize was that while my picture was being destroyed, another picture was forming in its place. We've been living with that picture for 15 years now, and honestly, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Getting that diagnosis was hard. It came at a time when I was already dealing with so much. It threw us into this world that we suddenly had to learn how to navigate, and it wasn't easy. Along with George, we had to figure out the communication delays and the autism meltdowns and funding for services and the special education system. We had to learn how to manage the sleep disorder that most autistic people have, the sensory avoidance behavior, the sensory seeking behavior. There have been times when it has been like walking on a tightrope in a strong wind. But we have been able to see a side of life that we wouldn't have seen otherwise. Early on, we developed an appreciation for the little things. Things that most parents wouldn't even notice were celebrated as major accomplishments Because they were. Like his first time playing with trains instead of lining them up, or the first time he told a joke, or, get this, how many people can say they remember the first time their child intentionally pointed at something? I can. I'll tell that story someday because it's amazing. I'm not going to sit here and glamorize autism. It has presented challenges in my own life, although I didn't always know it was autism, and it has presented challenges in George's life. It is a disability that impacts people in a multitude of different ways to different extents. But I will say that my husband and I ended up with the 2 kids we were supposed to have. We would not trade George for anything. Do I wish he wasn't autistic? No. Because if he wasn't autistic, he wouldn't be George. He is the person he's meant to be. So that is my story about my child's autism diagnosis. I want to tell these stories so that parents in this situation can feel less alone, and so they can know that it's going to be okay. Yes, you'll have days when you want to rip your hair out, but to me, that's just a typical day of parenting. It's going to be okay. Thank you for watching, everyone. Keep well, stay healthy, live your best life, and be kind. Bye.